Alright, so shortly after being introduced to gaming through the PlayStation 1, my parents let me start to play games on their home computer. The one thing they had a lot of was board game adaptations. Like they had one of those CD sleeve binders and it was full of them. I think most of them were by Hasbro. I don't even remember all of them. There were several that I never really played that much, if at all. I remember Clue was one of them. Three that I did play, though, one I brought up here is Monopoly. And I guess I should have brought this one up a little earlier, too, because we had the PlayStation 1 version, too. I actually remember playing the PlayStation 1 more. But I didn't really play either of them a lot, just because, I don't know, especially as a kid, it just felt a lot easier to just play an actual game of Monopoly rather than going through all the menus and stuff to try to do what you wanted to do. I remember the PlayStation 1 in particular even tried to sort of mimic a mouse and keyboard through the controller. Speaking of games I probably should have mentioned in the last part, I completely forgot to mention Frogger 2 Swampy's Revenge. I'd put it in the same category as Pitfall 3D and Rampage World Tour. Pretty much identical story, so I thought I would mention it particularly now and hopefully not forget another one. One board game that I thought was as fun to play on PC as it was to actually playing the board game was The Game of Life. I remember I particularly had the PC version of this. We didn't have the PS1 version at all. But I definitely remember, as you can see in some of these Google images, like those like really corny big head animations for the different events in the game. I don't know. I kind of probably at the time thought it was fun like watching a show or whatever. The last board game one that I particularly remember is Hoyle Board Games. I think we had a casino one too, but I mainly played the board game one. This game's kind of weird for me, actually, because I'm normally someone who would sample everything that's offered, especially back then. But I just sort of remember getting very preoccupied with the character creator. I would go in and make someone new every time. And after killing a lot of time there, I guess I would just sort of be in the mood just to play one quick game. See my creation along with some of the other wacky characters they had in the game that I believe had like animations occasionally too. I remember some of like the alien people I liked. I believe Snakes and Ladders was my go-to because I don't think the characters appeared in all of the games. And that was one where they did definitely appear, and it was just short, sweet, and to the point, I guess. Simple. We would eventually get some licensed games, naturally based on my two favorite shows, Spongebob and Jimmy Neutron. We had this particular Spongebob game, and I actually had the PC and the GBA version of the Jimmy Neutron game. I didn't like the GBA version, I barely played it. The PC version of this and of the Spongebob Operation Krabby Patty, I actually liked both of them. I don't remember ever making it particularly far in either of them, but I just sort of liked exploring around the worlds I was seeing in the shows. I think at the time I thought it was cool to see SpongeBob in 3D too, even if it didn't look the best. And I don't remember like some of the actual game activities in either being particularly good. I kind of remember them being sort of janky, but it didn't matter. Like I said, I just would walk around these worlds for a while. As I mentioned in the previous part, my favorite game was Crash Team Racing, so I got my first educational game. Also racing themed, Putt Putt Enters the Race. Holy shit, Nancy Cartwright was the voice actor of Putt Putt. I just saw, and yeah, I was right that she was in The Simpsons in that. But this was like a point-and-click thing. I remember it being a decent way to kill time. It wasn't a very long game. You can clear it in an hour or two. I remember really anticipating the race at the end. Just because, I don't know, as a kid I was thinking, like, I'm about to get some Crash Team Racing level-esque gameplay. And obviously it was pretty disappointing. It also felt rewarding to even reach that point in a way, having to go through all the point and click stuff, so I did consider getting the Android. I didn't even know it also came on Steam version a few years ago for nostalgia, but never did. I had one more edutainment game. This one I remember in particular, and maybe it was the same case for Putt, but we had like a scholastic thing in school where they would want you to like buy books and shit. But naturally, when I saw they were selling video games too, didn't matter what it was, I was getting that instead. I think I had a couple other of the Jumpstart games, but I think this is the only one I actually played. And I only very vaguely, like, I remember it being a treasure hunt. I kind of remember the overworld, and I kind of remember that clock game in the middle there. I didn't play this one as much. Like, if I was going to play a point-and-click game, I was going to be playing Putt over this. Another game that I'm pretty sure I got at the Scholastic thing was Backyard Basketball. It took me a bit to figure out which particular sport I got. It was also tough trying to narrow down what Jumpstart game I had, but I'm pretty sure that these were the two correct ones. Back then, though, too, I tried so hard to be quote-unquote cool, and sports were cool, so even if I didn't get it at the Scholastic thing, I probably would have wound up asking for it anyway. I don't know. I remember there was like cutscenes, and I think I was more interested in just seeing the different cutscenes than I was in the actual gameplay. As for a few games a little later down the timeline, I remember this. I guess it's technically not a game. Oh yeah, because it was made by WayForward. I'm learning a lot in this. I could see the Scholastic logo up there too, so I'm thinking I probably got it at the same thing, just a few years later. But I remember having some fun with this for a little bit. I remember when my classmates got it, and for a little while we would go over each other's houses and see what we made. And I thought it was like mind-blowing at the time, because to have my two favorite shows and another one I really liked back then with Spongebob, Jimmy Neutron, and Rugrats all in one game, being able to interact and stuff. I think this is like a really like interesting thing too, just because like when I first saw film editing software, I was like mildly familiar with the layout and how certain things function. And I feel like that's partially due to this game software, whatever you want to call it. It was a good introductory point for that type of thing. And I'm sure there was other stuff for like Photoshop as well. I don't know how available or popular this kind of stuff is now. But I don't know. I think it's a cool way to sort of introduce those sort of things to people. My one neighbor had Zoo Tycoon, and we had a lot of fun with it. So it was natural that I try to get it for myself. I remember I had the edition too that had, oh, right there, it had both the expansion packs. This was a good way to kill an afternoon too, to just go in with max money, design your zoo, watch things sort of slowly unlock. Takes an hour or two, and then after everything's unlocked, block off the exit, delete all the fences at the animal exhibits, and watch your reputation and guest satisfaction plummet, and everything you just worked for go away. This was actually probably the one PC game that I actually went back to in my adulthood, and I remember with the marine animals, I could never find out how to feed them. I remember when I went back to it, I don't know, maybe a little less than 10 years ago, but probably more than 5. I still couldn't figure out how to feed the marine animals. There was actually like a group of us, like growing up. I had like 3 friends that all lived within a 2 to 3 minute walk, all around the same age. I was right in the middle, but I think it was all within 3 or 4 years. Similar interests, so we tried getting into a few MMOs. First was Club Penguin. What really killed this is I think there was like a premium subscription service. I think it was like making you an agent, and you got access to extra content and a lot of like customization stuff. And that was something a few of us didn't have. I had it for 1 month, and then I just remember being really discouraged like when that went away. I lost all my shit. and it would be a pain in the ass to convince my parents to get another month, knowing that, well, I would probably need to get, more months after that, so I just never bothered. After that, one of my friends got World of Warcraft, and I knew that was going to be an even tougher sell. Because not only do you have the subscription, but I believe you had to buy the base game too. So I don't know. I thought it looked cool, but I just never bothered. I wonder how that would have went. Because actually, I found out later that we had some family friends who were into World of Warcraft too. So my parents were probably a little bit aware of it. And with those connections, maybe they would have been a little more, they can understand the investment. The rest of us tried to take refugee in, or refuge, however you say that, in RuneScape, which I don't know. Our one neighbor got into it, but I don't know. I was just like, I would rather play World of Warcraft. It looked a bit cooler than this. And I remember there was a point where it was sort of considered the lame thing at school too. So it was like I played the tutorial area, but at that point I was just sort of done with MMOs. And that was it for PC gaming for a very long time for me. Not until high school when I learned about Steam and came back in full force when I got a laptop and could run a bunch of decent games.